Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Padavajikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padavajikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. The Advent of Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So we'll be on page 694 today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So on this 14th day of December, Mokshada Ekadashi, the glorious anniversary of Lord Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is, as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, HG Dravida Dasa. Chapter 18, Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation, text number 54 on page 694. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samah sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati. Oh, 694. Madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Ladies? brahma-bhuta prasannatma nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. brahma-bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Anyone in Zoom land today?
brahma-bhuta prasannatma
brahma-bhuta prasannatma
nashochati nakangshati
nashochati nakangshati
samak sarveshu bhuteshu
samak sarveshu bhuteshu
madbhaktim labate param.
madbhaktim labate param. Brahma-bhuta, being one with the Absolute. Prasanna Atma, fully joyful, na, never, shochati, laments, na, never, kankshati, desires, samaha, equally disposed, sarveshu, to all, bhuteshu, living entities. Matpakdeen, my devotional service, labate, gains, param, transcendental. Translation. Lord Krishna says, one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the brahma-bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist, or pure devotee, one has to go still further, to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation, called brahma-bhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing for which to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or aspire for gain, because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment, because he knows that every living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see, in the material world, someone as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral, and the devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. Ephemeral means temporary. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the brahma-bhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. The idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes a phantasmagoria, and the senses are like serpents whose poison teeth are broken. As there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, there is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha, or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So just a few words about what a wonderful day it is, very appropriate, the anniversary of the speaking of the Bhagavad Gita, often called Gita Jayanti, but according to our acharyas, we should reserve that Jayanti word for the advent of Krishna himself. So we call it the advent of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains at the beginning of the 4th chapter why he appears, that famous verse, probably everyone knows by heart. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanim bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam sajamyaham. Whenever there is discrepancies arise in society in the terms of dharma, religion, at that time I manifest myself. And what does he do? Paritananaya sarunam bhinachayata dushkatam dharma sangstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I protect the devotees, I annihilate the miscreants, and I reestablish religion. Now, how does he do that? Well, one of the ways he does it is by teaching, and especially in the Bhagavad Gita. And there's also another Gita in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto called Uddhava Gita, where he talks about some of the same subjects, but a little bit more depth. So Krishna speaks himself, and he makes sure that those words are recorded, and they come down through the ages as the Bhagavad Gita. It's literally the song of God. And so it's a very glorious anniversary. Where would we be without the teachings of Krishna accessible? And we should know it's rare for him to come himself as in his original form. He always comes in some form, but to appear as himself, and especially to enact the pastimes in Vrindavan, which are replicas of the original pastimes in the highest realm of the spiritual world, we're very fortunate. 5,000 years, when you compare it to a day of Brahma, which is how long it takes, over 8 billion years. That's how long it'll take for Krishna to come back. So, and especially we're fortunate that that Krishna's representative, Srila Prabhupada, made so much sacrifice to give us these books and to see that they were available even after his departure. Books have been translated into at least 100 languages by now, and tens of millions of these Bhagavad Gitas have been distributed and made available. So we're very fortunate, and of course these translations and purports, we're not only associated with Krishna, but we're also associated with Srila Prabhupada, and that's the most auspicious. So this verse is often quoted. Srila Prabhupada quoted it. It's a key verse describing this state of brahma-bhuta, which is really what is described in the 14th chapter to some degree, and that's the complete transcendence of the modes of nature and situation in what we call Shuddha Sattva state, pure goodness. And some of the symptoms there have been described in the previous 3 verses, 51 to 53, being purified by his intelligence, controlling the mind with determination, giving up the object of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization and brahma-bhuta, which is the last line here. Well, one may say, well, that's quite a list. Now, if I'm going to try to, achieve those states one at a time, it's going to be pretty hard. How do you go about it anyway? So the answer is that the process of sadhana bhakti. It's interesting that this verse says, after coming to the brahma-bhuta stage, one attains bhakti to me. So this is a high state, in other words, to be bhakti. But bhakti yoga, as I pointed out last night, we can all practice that. We're practicing right now. Hearing the Bhagavad Gita or other transcendental literatures is an essential part of devotional service. And chanting the holy name, living in a holy place, or making one's place of residence holy, by the proper means, and all the different instructions that were given. That brings us to this brahma-bhuta stage naturally, and we attain more and more mature devotional service to Krishna. The whole idea with Lord Chaitanya's movement is that anyone can begin. No one is barred. It's not that, oh, no, you're not born in a Brahmin family. Take birth as a Brahmin family, then you come back. It's not like that. Because all of us are on the same plane. It says right here, samak sarveshu bhuteshu, to see everyone equally, spiritually. Not that there aren't differences, clearly, the human beings and the animals are different. But to understand every organism, every being that we see, in cases of soul. And on the soul platform, we're all equal. And so if we learn how to practice sadhana bhakti properly, then we can purify all of the crud, if you will, that has accumulated in our consciousness for millions of years. And what's left is this pure understanding of ourselves as spiritual and our relationship with Krishna, and a progressive experience as we've been described in this purport, which is very interesting because the last half of it, he's quoting this verse that I mentioned last night. We can go over it again. It's very nice. Of how the mature devotee, one who's been empowered by Lord Chaitanya, who's gotten the blessings of Lord Chaitanya, he has these qualities. Kaivalyam nadakayate. Remember that? Remember what that means? Yes, he sees kaivalya mean merging into the absolute and without a form, without a name, just to be existing on this level of pure consciousness in the Brahman state. Is like going to hell for a devotee. Why? Because there's no bhakti there. For bhakti, there needs to be three things: Bhagavan, the bhakta, and the process of bhakti, the relationship. So there's no Bhagavan, there's no form. There's simply the white light. And also, you don't have a form either. You're pure consciousness. So where's there any question of bhakti? So who wants it? You know, forget it, not going to hell. And Tridashapur, Akasha Pushpayate, you remember what Tridashapur is? Yeah, the demigods. It's said sometimes there's 33 million. There's a lot of, we know some of the main ones. You know, Indra's abode and so forth, Brahma's abode. So the devotee has no desire to go there. Now, if you're on the material plane, that sounds good, and people are enacting that all the time. They save their money, they take out a loan, they move from a poor part of the town to the richer part of the town, and that's their perverted reflection of going to the heavenly planets. But those who know the Vedas, they can actually go, you know, by performing yajnas and so forth. It's rare today that they really do it properly. But you can aspire for that. It's all on the material level. So you'll have a more comfortable environment, you'll live longer, a healthy body, you know. But it's still bound by matter. It's still bound by time. And the first thing as human beings, according to Vedanta Sutra, Tato Brahma Jigyasa, we should be interested in the absolute truth, the eternal reality from which everything has come. That's Brahman, you know, which everything has come, which sustains everything, and into everything merges at the end. So that inquiry has nothing to do with the heavenly planets. That's the transcendental reality, the supreme absolute truth. And Vedanta Sutra, I was just reading a wonderful chapter in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the last chapter of the Madhya Lila, where there's kind of a further explanation of Lord Chaitanya's interaction with the impersonalists and Mayavadis in Benares, Varanasi, where he went there and he was a sannyasi. He actually took sannyas in the Mayavad Sampradaya, because there was no the Vaishnava sannyas at that time. But he wanted to preach, so he did that. So he was dancing and chanting with his devotees in the streets, and they were thinking, oh, he's a sentimentalist. He should be studying Vedanta with us. You know, this is our duty, right? So they were deriding him, and his Prakashananda Sari had huge numbers of disciples, very influential at the time. So he had a few of his disciples there, the Lord Chaitanya, Chandrasekhar Acharya and Tapan Mishra was there. And so they were very much pained by all this blasphemy, you know. So they requested Lord Chaitanya, can you please meet with them and explain what's going on, you know. So finally he did. And, you know, the Mayavadis, they like to address everyone as Narayan, each other as Narayan, right? So Lord Chaitanya, he took a very humble position. He came in, sat down, you know, he bathed his feet, where everyone was, and then he sat down there, where all the foot baths had taken place. It's like an unclean place. But then he showed an effulgence, because after all, he's Krishna, you know. And he said, oh, he must be Narayan. You know, they would say, oh, Om Narayan. They always address everyone as Narayan, but they really were correct in this case. He really was Narayan. Anyway, it all worked out that he actually converted all of them into bhakti. And he explained Vedanta Sutra very wonderfully as the natural commentary to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because you look at some of the second sutra, you know, what is that Brahman we have to be? Tato Brahma Jigyasa. We need to be, inquire into Brahman, the absolute truth. Now, coming to the human form of life, don't waste it, inquire it. What is that Brahman? Second sutra. Janmad yasya yataha. That from which everything takes birth, generated, etc. Adi, etc. is sustenance and destruction. You know, so he was the source of everything, who sustains everything, and into everything into whom everything merges at the end. That's what we should inquire about. So, what's the first words of the Bhagavatam aside from Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? Janmadyasya yataha. The verse, but then it goes on. Besides the detail, Janmadyasya yatonvayada tadatashtate shabhigyasvara. It's describing Krishna as he who enlightened Brahma within, who knows everything, super soul, and who is, you know, bewildering everyone since time immemorial. And of course, the first words are Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're speaking of Vasudeva. So the Bhagavatam continues and illuminates, because the sutras are kind of mysterious. Sutras, the aphorisms, they can be interpreted in different ways. Shankaracharya, he interpreted the whole thing in such a way that it seemed to come to an impersonal conclusion, that the absolute is just Brahman. So, Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself, he taught this very simple process of entering into bhakti, which is just beginning to chant Hare Krishna, and hear from a realized soul. Those are the two things you have to do. And that's exactly what Prabhupada gave when he came to America. He was chanting Hare Krishna by the hour, and people were coming, taking part. And then those who were fortunate stayed and heard him speak. And then afterward he chanted a little bit more and then took prasadam. That was that was the festival. And it was very purifying and very attractive. And he got a following, and everything flowed from there. So this verse says, here's some of the qualities here. Becomes naturally joyful, prasanatma. Now, how does that natural joy come out? Because if you study the prerequisites, you're withdrawing from all the sense gratification and things. It seems like you would be an ascetic who's like taking pleasure in austerity, withdrawing. But the point is that if you use all of that self-control to fix the mind and senses and intelligence on Krishna, then you hook up to the actual reservoir of pleasure. We have this little pamphlet, millions have been distributed. Krishna is a reservoir of pleasure. We're naturally blissful. We should remember that. All of this, Sturm und Drang, they call it, and anxiety and depression, it's all completely unnatural. We're not meant to, have a little bit of pleasure, ups and downs in our lives, and then get old, and what's going to happen to me, and what's going to, and die, in great agony. And then be reborn again, which is more agony, and that's not our natural state. That's completely artificial. That's our punishment for turning away from Krishna. So we are naturally blissful, just as Krishna is. We're part and parcel. So this brahma-bhuta state, this is the first installment of that, and so you're naturally happy, prasanatma. And what's the symptom? You don't lament for anything, because you're not really attached to anything material. Lamentation means you have something and you lose it. Right? You hanker for something, you may get it, and then you lose it, and it's like worse than not having it in the first place. So you think about it, is that material life is full of this kankshati and shochati. I want this, I want that, just like a little kid, right, at any age. I want it. Like you go to any supermarket, and they always have a range of candy at the checkout, where the mother's waiting in line to check out, and the kids are thinking, oh, get me that. So the whole world becomes a candy store as you grow up. Oh, let me get that. Oh, I have to work hard to get it. It's shochati and kankshati. So Prahlad Maharaj said this. He describes this. What does he call it? The fire of lamentation, fire of difficulty. Yasmat priya priya yoga sa yoga janma shok agnina sakala yona shodayamana. Dayamana means burning. So he's describing the material life in two lines here. It says, those things which are dear to you, or you may want them, you may get them, those things which are dear in your body itself, eventually is taken away from you. This is the way it is by the time. And those things which are abominable to you, inflation, COVID, we all have our own list, they're forced upon you. Old age, disease, death, So this is called the fire of lamentation. So, yasmat priya priya yoga sa yoga janma shoka agnina means a fire of shoka. He said na shochati was the fire. And not just in one birth, but in all kinds of births, different animals. Now in human life, he goes on, we have duk aushadhi. We come up with remedies for the pain. It's like this huge medical system, trillions of dollars every year. That's all to try to push away the ravages of disease, obviously, and a million other things. To try to, like, we're all wearing warm clothes now because it's cold here. We're really going to try to get heat next year. We're planning on it after all these years. The fallacy was, oh, it's San Diego. We don't need a heating system. The climate has changed. Anyway, sorry about that. But everyone's wearing warm clothes because it's cold, right? So this is called dukaushadam. But you carry it onto its end, fossil fuels. All right, we can build these cars, we can build the planes, we can warm things, build electricity. But now, what's it created? Dukaushadam tadapi dukam. The remedy for all of the things that the fossil fuels have cured has caused a worse dukkha, unhappiness, which can overwhelm the whole earth. So this is the nature of material life. Is that there's some need, you try to fill it, and you may fulfill it for a while. Oh, now I'm enjoying, but then it's taken away. Or there's some pain, and you try to cure it, but then that cure makes it more painful. So where's the percentage? It's just frustration all around. And then he gives the analysis in 3 syllables, atadhyaham, 4 or 5 syllables. And it's all rooted in this idea that I'm thinking I'm something I'm not. I'm thinking I'm this body, or the mind, subtle or gross body together. We're not that. So then, now that's 3 lines, pretty depressing. But now in the 4th line, he solves the problem. He's speaking to Lord Nrsingadev. Bhuman brahmami padame tabadasya yogam. Oh, my Lord, my great Lord, please enlighten this wandering soul by teaching me about your dasya yoga or bhakti yoga. And this is how we should all feel. We need this enlightenment, just like Arjuna at the beginning of the Gita. He had his whole argument down why he wasn't going to fight. Right? He didn't want to fight, and so his head was serving his heart, so to speak. And that was that I definitely don't want to kill my worshipable grandfather and teachers and all these friends and relatives. So now I know, if I kill all the men, then the women will be unprotected, there'll be unwanted children, the society will go to hell, I'll be responsible, everyone, and I'll suffer. So he had all these arguments down even from the Vedas, right? So, but at the end, but it didn't solve his dilemma. He ended up paralyzed, dropped his bow, he was crying, because Krishna is right on the chariot. He knows he wants to fight, but he couldn't do it because his heart, his emotions were telling him. So he approaches Krishna. This is a key change in the Gita. The first part is introduction. Karpanya dosho pahata swabhava prichami tvam dharma samudha chetar yakshe yaksyan nishtitam bruhitan me shishyasteham sharimam tvam papannam. So he said, this miserly weakness of mine has stolen away my actual nature. Karpanya dosho apahata swabhava. It means that I'm not in my natural nature as a powerful kshatriya fighting for good. I'm paralyzed. So, and Prichami Tvam Dharma Samudaya, please tell me what I should do, because I'm completely bewildered about what the right thing is to do. Dharma Samudaya Cheta. Yakshe Yaksyan, tell me how I can achieve my really substantial good for myself. This word Shreya comes up again. Nishtitam, for certain. Tell me for certain. I'm too bewildered, Bruhitan me. I am your shishya now. Let's not do the friend-to-friend thing, because we can argue forever. Shishyasteham shadimam tvam papannam. I'm surrendering to you. Please instruct me. And we should also feel like that we really can't figure it out on our own, what the right thing is to do. Because we have all of these influences from our lower self, from the senses, from the mind, from bad associates, We need that pure teaching that's coming down. That's why the Bhagavad Gita, as it is coming down purely through the pure devotee, and he can inspire others. It's amazing how, as Prabhupada often pointed out, there were so many translations of Bhagavad Gita before Prabhupada came in '65. I read one of them. A little slim volume, I think just translations basically, And there was a market for them because there was a new age and there was a lot of exploration interested in India, all that. So I didn't know what I was looking for. I picked it up and read through it. And I don't remember even getting any impetus to change my life in any way or anything like that. It was just, that's pretty interesting, far out, But with Prabhupada's explanations, it becomes clear, it's very coherent, that Krishna is bringing us now to text 65 and 66, which is the essence of the whole thing. Just think of me. Absorb your mind in me, become my devotee, offer your homage to me, bow down to me. Certainly you'll come to me, I promise you, because you're my very, very dear friend. And he's the very dear friend of all of us, not just Arjuna. And then the key verse, Sarva dharma parityaja. Give up all these other things I spoke about, the Ashtanga yoga and the Karma yoga. Just surrender to me. Mamekang, alone. Sharanam bhaja. Take shit. Aham tvam savapapa vimokshiyasami. I will liberate you completely from any sinful reaction you may think you're going to incur from this battle. I've already killed them. You just be my instrument and get the credit. And Mahashucha, don't worry. You see, the shucha, the shochiti, is the same word here. Don't worry, everything will be fine. You notice, if you stay for Artik, you see Radharani? Mahashucha, don't worry. Just chant Hare Krishna, serve us, become purified, keep coming to Bhagavad Gita class, and everything will be fine. So that's his mad bhaktim labate param. And then one attains in that state, one can really experience the higher levels of devotional service. And in this is roiling ocean, or forest fire, whatever you call it, of material life in Kali Yuga, you can have an oasis of peace and happiness, even and be able to negotiate the difficult times we're in. Who knows what's going to happen? But if we're at Krishna's lotus feet, then it's going to be all auspicious. We have to be really serious and desire. There's this one verse, Lord Chaitanya, in his conversation with Ramananda Roy, it comes to a very high level. But the question is, how does one attain Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada, the verse starts like this: Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate. So that first line, it was what Prabhupada's inspiration for that phrase, Krishna consciousness. Now, that wasn't in any literature before Prabhupada came. So Krishna bhakti rasa, so the mellows of devotional service. Mati means the mind absorbed in Krishna bhakti rasa. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavita mati is pure Krishna consciousness. Kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate. You should buy it if you can find it somewhere in the market. You should purchase it. Kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate. But what's the price? Who knows the price? One's intense desire for it. Tatra laulyam api mulyam. It's a play on word. Mulyam is the price, and laulyam means the ardent desire for it. Tatra laulyam api mulyam ekalam. The only price of it. Janma koti sukatayana labhyate. Millions of births of material pious activity will not enable you to get either the bhakti or the eagerness for it. You'll stay focused on material benefits that you can get. That's what sukriti means. Mundane sukriti and dushkriti, So how to get that eagerness? That's the question. That's the process of sadhana bhakti. Associate with devotees. You sadhu sangha, and then you want to practice chanting. You have to be chanting and so many other things. Beginning with the chanting and hearing, and giving up so many things on the strength of the chanting and hearing, and then becoming purified anartha nivritti. There's so many anarthas, doubts in our mind, unwanted desires, fears, anxieties. All these things are weighing us down. And they can be cleansed. Krishna himself, depending on our sincerity and our intensity, and he'll cleanse them away. What does it say? Shinvatam sakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana ridyantaksto yabadrani vidunoti suritsatam. Literally, Krishna cleanses away these abhadras, these unwanted things, when we sincerely, basically hear about him. Shinvatam swakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana, which bring piety just by hearing. So the hearing and chanting is the key. So that process, and at one point we want to become confirmed in the line. In other words, make a firm commitment to initiation as part of this bhajana kriya. And then when a certain percentage, not all of the anarthas are finished, you come to the point of nishta. Nishta means a firm devotional. The doubts are practically nil. You're convinced that Shraddha Shabda Krishna Bhakti Korle Sarva Karma Katahoy, that just by the activities of Krishna consciousness, all my aspirations will be fulfilled. I'll become unlimitedly happy, and my unhappiness will be shrunk down to zero. That's what every living entity wants. that they'll be eternally happy and blissful, and that there'll be no unhappiness. It sounds like pie in the sky. People will say there is no such life, right? You're right. On this plane, there is no such life, and it's foolish to try for it. But on the spiritual plane, there is. That's where we came from. That's our original nature in the spiritual sky. That's why this phrase "back home, back to Godhead" is so relevant for us. So that's now we're coming to the final portion of the Bhagavad Gita, and each verse is so cogent. Okay, any questions on this essential verse, brahma-bhuta prasanatma? Yes, Prabhu. You've got the mic right here, right here. Prabhu, hand. Yeah, but you have to turn it on. You know, just hold the button there till the lights on.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hi, Bo.
I want to touch base on what you just said about Arjun, that Krishna advised him to fight the battle because Krishna showed him that by not fighting the battle, what the world will end up being, the misery of the world, and by fighting the battle, he will be aiding the world in the guidance of Krishna.
Yeah.
Then why was the Kali Yuga followed right after the battle of Kurukshetra? I mean, when the Krishna departed, was it to manifest this bhakti yoga, or like Krishna wanted to fight the battle so that the religious and pious can rule the world and show the good side of it, but right after it, the Kali Yuga followed.
Well, as Krishna says in the beginning of the 4th chapter, when he recounts the history of the Gita, he said, "I spoke it to the sun god. Imam vasvate yogam proktavana hamabhyam vivasvan manabepa manurikshaka. I spoke to the sun god, who spoke to his son Vaivasvata Manu, who spoke to his son Ikraku, and this way came down to human society. But evam parambara praptam imam rajarshi avadu, and it was received by the Rajarshis, the saintly kings who could actually help all society become Krishna conscious. But sakalene hamata yogo nashta padantapa, that by the powerful force of time, mahakala, the science as it is has become lost, distorted, and so I've come now to renew it. And this is Krishna's powerful time factor. There are always, even though, yes, he annihilated so many demons, he reinstated Yudhishthira on the throne, but what happened? Then Kali Yuga, Parikshit was there, but he couldn't hold off Kali Yuga forever. You remember there's a confrontation there. And so what did he do? When he was cursed, Parikshit, it was a very unusual thing. And the fact that he insulted a Brahmin was unheard of. And then that the Brahminical class had become corrupted in the form of this little boy Shringi, who had the tejas but not the discrimination, And he cursed the king, which is the pious king, Vaishnav king. So instead of counter-cursing or neglecting it, he accepted it so that the Bhagavatam could manifest. Because it says in the Bhagavatam itself, Krishne swadhamo pagade dharma jnana saha kalau nashta dishamesha puranako dunoditaha. The question was, well, where does Dharma reside now, and knowledge, now that Krishna has departed? So after Krishna's departure, the Bhagavatam has arisen just like the sun to give this benighted population of Kali Yuga a chance to also get real knowledge. So you can't hold back the ages, just like there's going to be, winter season is here and then spring is coming, it's like that. So, but Krishna makes arrangements where there's always an opportunity. And just 4,500 years into Kali Yuga, he manifested Lord Chaitanya. And according to, what's the brahma-bhuta Purana, one of the Puranas says there's a 10,000-year hiatus in Kali Yuga where Lord Chaitanya's movement reigns and the chanting is predominant. If everyone would chant Hare Krishna, the world would become like Vaikuntha, right? And there's a beautiful verse by Prahlad Maharaj. I don't know if I can't know if I can remember the whole Sanskrit. Svasthasta vishwasya kalak pasidadham dhyayanta bhutani shivam mitodhya manashta baddham bhagavan adhokshache. Last line I don't have. But what he's saying there is that swasti astu, may everyone be happy, pass away, by practicing bhakti yoga toward Hokshaja, the transcendental Lord Krishna. Because by practicing that, they'll think of each other's welfare. You can see what's happening, that everyone is an island unto himself these days, you know, and there's so many factions and things and dissension. I mean, Kali Yuga is progressing very rapidly. And why is it called Kali Yuga? Fighting. Kali Yuga means fighting. So how to push back on that? By purifying everyone's heart, so there'll really be a serious empathy with others. The characteristic of the real devotees is pada dukkha dukhi. That for myself, I can think of Krishna, I'm chanting Hare Krishna and serving, and I need practically nothing, you know, the great devotees, to be happy. But my heart is breaking because all of these poor souls don't know about Krishna, and they're suffering in the fire of illusion. So therefore, let me try to help them. So now if that mood, you know, predominates, and there's more and more people like that, that's really what makes the life livable, you know. And then the devas and the Lord himself, and they make for prosperity. Nature also cooperates. Now we're wondering why, you know, we're messing things up with the climate change, you know. But that's all part of the reaction to all of this artificial life that people are living, and which makes people's hearts harder and harder. And so the idea is that Krishna comes and he sets things right, but he knows that by the force of time things will be great again. That's just the way things are. But within that Kali Yuga, there is this time where he comes again as Lord Chaitanya and gives a chance for all of us. So we should take that chance. You know, things are going to go on. You know, the world will keep turning. But the more we can do to become Krishna conscious and give Krishna conscious to others, the happier we'll be and the better off society will be. That's all. All right, let's do one more. This next verse is also extremely important. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his plenary portions cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by the non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take to pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. As already stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.25, Naham prakasha sarvasya. He is not revealed to everyone. No one can understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. One who is fully conversant with the Krishna science becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. Devotional service is there, and as long as devotional service exists, there must be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. Such knowledge is never vanquished, even after liberation. Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, the same distinction is there, the same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. One should not mistakenly think that the word vishate, enters into me, supports the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No. Vishate means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in one's individuality to engage in his association and render service unto him. For instance, a green bird enters a green tree, not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into the ocean and merging. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality like an aquatic in the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean if we go deep. Surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. Because of his pure devotional service, a devotee can understand the transcendental qualities and the opulence of the Supreme Lord in truth. As it is stated in the 11th chapter, only by devotional service can one understand. The same is confirmed here. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service and enter into his kingdom. After attainment of the brahma-bhuta stage of freedom from material conceptions, devotional service begins by one's hearing about the Lord. When one hears about the Supreme Lord, automatically the brahma-bhuta stage develops, and material contamination, greediness, and lust for sense enjoyment disappears. As lust and desires disappear from the heart of a devotee, he becomes more attached to the service of the Lord, and by such attachment, he becomes free from material contamination. In that state of life, he can understand the Supreme Lord. This is the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam also. After liberation, the process of bhakti or transcendental service continues. The Vedanta Sutra 4.1.12 confirms this. Aprayanat tatrapi hi drishtam. This means that after liberation, the process of devotional service continues. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, real devotional liberation is defined as the reinstatement of the living entity in his own identity, his own constitutional position. The constitutional position is already explained. Every living entity is a part and parcel of fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his constitutional position is to serve. After liberation, this service has never stopped. Actual liberation is getting free from the misconception of life. Sorry. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, what is mukti? There's actually a lot in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Bhagavatam inspiring us to aspire for mukti. When Krishna says in the 13th chapter, Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha dosha anudarshanam. One of the elements of knowledge is to always be aware of the fault, the inevitable fault in material life of birth, old age, disease, and death. It seems like a good part of material life, especially when you're young and vibrant and healthy, is to do things so you forget that. I like to tell this story. When I was in Miami, I spent 6 years there working on the Bhagavatam with Gopi Parananda Prabhu and Ridhinanda Maharaj. And they had at that time they had a temple right on the beach, Miami Beach. Literally, I could see the ocean about 60 yards from my window. Well, there it was. That was where our offices were. So I was told there was a boardwalk out there where people were back and forth, and they had just built that at a huge cost of $10 million, all up and down the beach. Okay, so gradually, as I lived there, and I learned what the population was about. And there's a lot of retirees who come down, especially from New York, and they retire there in hotels. Many of them have some money, and get out. They go on the boardwalk. So at that time, there was also a phenomenon where the wealthy class of Brazilians, the 20, 23-year-olds, youngsters, they would come up and do vacation when it was winter down there in summer up in Miami, and they set up a volleyball net on the beach, and they would play volleyball, boys and girls, having a great time. And just like 25 feet away, you had these old people walking, getting a little exercise on the boardwalk, trying to, keep the. So it was a perfect contrast. Here you had these youngsters who were, they were wealthy, and they were healthy, and they were athletic and beautiful, and everything. They were living the life, cavorting on the beach in southern Florida. And you could see they weren't like looking over at the people, the old people, and thinking, oh, that's going to be me in a little while. Maybe I should think about that. No, they were just like I was when I was that age and had no idea about this. They were old people and they were young people, and I'm lucky because I'm one of the young people. It didn't dawn on me that I would graduate. You know, of course, you know theoretically, but you don't feel like that. It's part and parcel of the answer. There's this wonderful conversation between Yudhishthira and Yamaraj in the Mahabharata. A whole series of questions and answers. You're probably more familiar with it than I am. But there's one famous question that Prabhupada would focus on. And he's out in the forest, and he's at a lake. They needed some water, and his brothers they were all unconscious near him because they had drunk the water against the injunction of Yamaraj. He said, "This is my, the disembodied voice. This is my lake. You have to answer these questions first." And a bunch of Kshatriyas, Bhima and Arjuna, said, "Okay, I'll drink first and answer later." So they drank and they fell unconscious. So Yudhishthira is there, but he was Dharma personified. If it's not his lake, he won't drink it. So he's answering the questions. And one of the questions is, what's the most amazing thing in the world? And the answer is, Ahani bhutani gachanti himalayam sheshakstavanamichanti kimaschayam atakparam. The last line means, what could be more amazing than this? So what it says is, day after day, millions of human beings who die, and they're dragged off to Yamaraj for judgment, But those who are left, those who remain, they're living as if they'll never die. People, they're thinking it's going to go on like this forever. You think, yeah, my grandmother died, my grandfather died, oh, my friend died, poor guy had cancer, but I'm okay, we're good. But actually, we're all headed there. And no one is thinking, what's the point? What's the point of struggling so hard to build something in this world and then just have it taken all away? There is no point. It's a tale told by an idiot. Wasn't that? That's right from Shakespeare. I don't know if he knew that much, but he didn't know what the answer to it is. So that's a call for liberation. We want to get liberated from birth and death. Time. Huh? Okay. All right. So anyway, the answer is that that's the most amazing thing, and we can solve the problem by becoming Krishna conscious. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari. You need a little